who got told that they had less than 1 year to live, that their only hope for survival was to get a life-saving heart transplant, but because of organ donor shortages, their name is simply added to a waiting list, and they just have to hope and wait. What if that individual chose to take things into their own hands? From the comfort of here in Birmingham, they could make some inquiries, go online to certain websites, enter their personal details, payment options, and they could book their heart transplant weeks in advance in a foreign country. Now the thing about heart transplantation is that that operation has to happen within hours of the donor having died. So if that person is booking their heart transplant on a specific date, weeks in advance, they must be booking their matched donor's death weeks in advance at a specific date and time. This may sound like fantasy, but unfortunately this is fact. And the background to this scenario is that the UK, like virtually every other country in the world, has a major problem with organ donor shortages. Now, trust me when I tell you that transplantation is one of the true medical miracles of the last 50, 60 years. It saves lives, improves the quality of life. When it comes to kidney transplantation, which is the commonest transplant performed, it saves a vast amount of money. The problem that we have is that we're faced with harsh realities. Firstly, despite the number of transplants that we do, the waiting list is still static at about 7,000 people in the UK. And the other harsh reality is that 3 to 4 people every single day are removed from their waiting list. Not because they've got a transplant, but because they either die or they're removed from the waiting list because they're too frail to get a transplant. These are desperate people, and desperate people are vulnerable to do desperate things. The World Health Organization estimates that 10 to 15% of global transplantation activity is either illegal or unethical. Now, many of those cases are individuals or criminal organizations or gangs who engage in organ trafficking, but that pales in comparison to one of the shocking crimes against humanity which has been happening in the contemporary era. A nationwide, state-sanctioned, systematic process of organ theft from incarcerated prisoners who are killed on demand for their organs. That nation is China, and those prisoners are primarily prisoners of conscience, mainly Falun Gong practitioners, but also Uyghur Muslims, Tibetans, political prisoners. Historically, up to 90% of the 10 to 20,000 transplants that China performed came from these executed prisoners. Now, since January 2015, China claims that they've stopped using prisoners for their organs. But the numbers of transplants that China's been performing over the last few years has remained static. So the question arises, where are these organs coming from? And the problem is that with a lack of transparency and a lack of openness with the data, it's difficult to verify whether these claims are correct. So what can we do to try and stop this heinous crime? Well, you can support organisations such as DAFOR, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, which is a non-government organisation that I volunteer for as a secretary. And they've been campaigning for over a decade to try and raise awareness of what happens in China and to try and bring this forced organ harvesting to an end. But there's something even more fundamental that we can do. As long as you have organ donor shortages, you will have organ trafficking. And what we need to do is we need to try and make ourselves self-sufficient so that the supply of organs matches the need for transplants. So we all need to show our willingness to donate organs. We need to change our mindset, change our attitudes, and we need to change our culture. We would all take a transplant if we needed one, either for ourselves or for our loved ones, yet only a third of us are actually registered on the organ donor register. If you're happy to receive an organ, you should be happy to give an organ, and we can't have any room for hypocrisy. Your organs are absolutely useless to you after you die, but you could give the gift of life to up to 8 individuals. Organ donation is something that needs to become in our culture, and everyone can be an organ donor. Young, old, fat, thin, white, black, Asian. Minority ethnics are less likely to be organ donors, but they're much more likely to need an organ transplant. And some of the examples given for people when they say that we can't be organ donors, religious obstacles, cultural issues, language barriers, they don't stop people from taking organs, so they shouldn't stop people from giving organs. So what are the next steps that you need to do? Well, it's very easy. On your smartphones, on your laptops, you simply need to put into your search engine Organ Donation UK. The first website that comes up is the UK one. It takes you a few minutes to register. After that, you need to do the second most important thing. You need to tell your family and friends what your wishes are, because consent for organ donation to go ahead still remains poor, and it's less than 60%. And when you tell your family and friends, you should ask your family and friends, would you have me take a transplant if you needed one? And then follow that up with, are you on the organ donor register? And that way we can have this ripple effect of this change in attitude, change in culture, and a change in our mindset. And by doing that, not only will we help save desperate lives for people on the waiting list here in the UK, but you'll also save vulnerable lives for people who are incarcerated in labour camps in China. Thank you.